little puppet made of pine, wake. The gift of life is thine.
Why is Pinocchio so boring and unmemorable when it's so amazing? Following the massive success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, film expectations must have been so high for Disney's second film. Yet Pinocchio is remembered, or not remembered, as one of the less impressive of the early films of Walt Disney. But the thing is, when I sit down to watch it, when I forget everything about how I thought that it was an awful movie, or just boring, or generally not that great, I start laughing out loud, crying, it moves me. And yet, when I'm done, I need to wait at least 2 years before I watch it again. Because it's boring. So, what is this discrepancy? Why is there such a big difference between when we watch it and when we remember it? I was scrolling through the internet, of course, doing some research on Disney stuff because that's what I do, when I came across Ryan's article at DisneyFilmProject.com where he said something that made a light bulb go off over my head. Cue light bulb. Light bulb. Many animation historians and people much smarter and experienced than I have named Pinocchio as the masterpiece of Walt Disney's first golden age of animation. Not to say that I disagree, but I think there is a definite difference between a technical masterpiece and something that the audience will embrace. He is 100% correct! Yes, that's what it is! There is a difference. A technical masterpiece arouses in us many emotions: sorrow, happiness, a deep peace, fulfillment, laughter, and true fear, and it does so with brilliantly crafted artwork. Yet, while there are all these things we need and yearn for in a film, that's not ultimately what keeps us coming back to it over and over again. What we want most in a film is to be entertained. We want fuzzy, feel-good emotions. That's what keeps us coming back, paying tons of money as a nation, billions of dollars poured into movies. We can follow this trend in any famous box office film. When adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind is the most successful box office hit of all time, followed closely by 1977's Star Wars. After that comes The Sound of Music, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and finally Titanic is number 5 on the list. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is number 10 on that list. It's the first Disney film that appears. Now, what's feel good about Gone with the Wind or Titanic, right? But think about it. When you sit down to watch Titanic and it's over, do you feel good? Yeah. Because even though he dies in the end, sorry if I spoiled anything, you've had lots of time to watch this movie, he does it for love. And she remembers him for the rest of her life. She loves him for forever, and he died for her so that she could live. It's one of the greatest love stories of all time. Okay, but the thing is, it isn't. I know, you guys are gonna not be happy with me, but it's not the greatest love story of all time. There are ones that are way better, that don't require a young girl to relinquish her virginity to a man who is not that great. Like, really, he's not that great for her, or in general. I'm gonna get so many hate comments for that statement. I should probably just make a whole video about Titanic to actually flesh this out, and maybe I'll find out I'm wrong. But I don't think so. But Titanic is done so well that we don't even care that it's a superficial relationship that began and ended within a couple days, guys. A couple days. Because we felt it. And it made us feel good. That's a story that sells. And I can make that argument for Gone with the Wind too, although it would take longer and I only have so much time in this video. Again, I should probably do a video on that one too. Anyway. The point is, Pinocchio doesn't evoke these emotions as well or as consistently as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That's why it didn't do as well. For the first half of Pinocchio, we are sufficiently entertained. Jiminy Cricket, Cleo, Figaro, Geppetto, I smile thinking about them. Even Stromboli and Honest John are very amusing characters. And then we get to Pleasure Island.
Yourselves. It's all free, boys. It's all free. Hurry, 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 hurry.
The rough house. The rough house. It's the roughest of the...
That's when the film begins to be largely not light. Pinocchio is removed from anyone that he, or the audience, feels an emotional connection with. Plus, we lose comical characters. From then until the very last scene, we get very little humor. The story does pick up when Pinocchio finds his father again, because now we have an emotional connection, and without humor, that is the strongest appeal in a story. But it's not quite enough to make up for the intensity and creepiness of what's happening on film. So even though we are still glued to our seats wondering what's going to happen, when the film is over, that sequence was too long for us to remember fondly. Okay, Pinocchio is a wonderful film, and to say that it doesn't do something as well as Snow White is not a condemnation. I am comparing it to one of the best animated films of all time because in and of itself, it is one of the best animated films of all time. So now that we've ripped it apart, let's look at what makes it so amazing. The story is ostensibly about a wooden puppet who must learn to be good in order to be a real boy. But if we dig a little deeper, we discover the real theme is actually about wishes coming true. Walt Disney did not tell a story about someone who merely wishes for something to come true, and then everything turns out all right. The story is much more nuanced than that. It involves the suffering, pain, growth, and hard work that goes into creating something after you've wished for it. And in addition to that, Walt Disney includes the fact that you don't get anything without grace and a little bit of divine assistance. As a dreamer, Disney believed in wishing. As a Christian, he believed in grace. And as a successful man, he knew the value of hard work in order to make your dreams come true. So that's what he made his movie about. Temptation is the villain, which is fascinating because there's lots of villains, and that feels a little disjointed at first until you think about it. Jiminy Cricket shows up and tells Pinocchio that temptation is the worst thing that he can face in life and that he has to overcome all of them in order to be a good boy. Well, when he meets Honest John, he says, "Remember that thing I told you about temptation? Well, that's him." Because, forgive my accent, because he knows that temptation is the true villain, which is why we don't see any of the other bad guys get their due reckoning, right? We don't see that happen on screen. Although it would have been very satisfying to see Honest John and Gideon Stromboli and the coachman swallowed up by Monstro and then torturing each other until the end of time in his belly. That would be so great. As for the hero of the story, Pinocchio is not the only hero. Jiminy is just as much the protagonist. It is a story of Pinocchio and Jiminy together, which makes sense because Jiminy is, in fact, only an extension of Pinocchio's consciousness. He is his conscience. They both learn that reward only comes through a combination of grace and hard work. Jiminy lays that out at the beginning when he says that this is how I learned that wishes can come true. And ladies and gentlemen, time for the fun fact of the day. Pinocchio cost $2.3 million and only made between $1.4 and $1.9 million upon its release in theaters. Okay, so you can't talk about Pinocchio without talking about the most famous song possibly in all of Disney, which is When You Wish Upon a Star. It might arguably be one of the most famous and well-beloved songs of all time. It plays several times every day at Magic Kingdom. The success of the song supposedly shocked its creators, who did not anticipate it becoming such a big deal, but something in the lyrics pulls at the listeners' hearts. It perfectly sums up the theme of the film, and in its composition and delivery of the theme, I think it even might surpass it, because in just a few minutes, it rouses hope, tears, and fulfillment in the hearts of its audience. Such a wonderful song.
When you wish upon a star, as dreamers do.
Oh. With Snow White, Disney awoke in us an appreciation of deep beauty. And with Pinocchio, he brought us an expectation of the fact that wishes can come true. And the thing is that for Disney, Pinocchio was a dream come true. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a massive success, which opened the door to allowing him to make all of these fleshed out stories animated. That was a dream come true for him. And he could go on making films for the rest of his life, which he did. Thanks guys, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all of my Disney films. Let me know what you think of my analysis in the comments below. You can visit my blog at thefairytaleblog.com.